All right, Mallory. Let's talk about our first discussion. Carter, this is your idea. I'll give credit where credit is due. The sentence I'm going to start to open this topic is Texas. We'll start with Texas. Texas will not make the college football playoff because Carter.
The offensive line is struggling. And okay, let me caveat this with they just were announced as Joe Moore Award semifinalists. So you might be thinking, why the hell is this the Achilles heel that the Longhorns could have? Mm-hmm. Well, outside of the Vanderbilt-Georgia games, they've been fantastic. Mm-hmm. They've allowed 7 sacks all year. But in that Vanderbilt and Georgia game, probably the 2 best front sevens they faced, they allowed 11 sacks. And I was rewatching those games, specifically the offensive plays. I counted up, of those 11 sacks, 7.5 came from a linebacker or a defensive back. Mm-hmm. So it's not that the Texas offensive line is getting physically manhandled or just losing one-on-one matchups. They're just getting confused a lot. I think in those games, Georgia and Vanderbilt has found the formula of disguising blitzes and rolling down linebackers. And this isn't a novel concept, right? But you're starting to see cracks in that offensive line in how you can beat this Texas team.
I'll say this. I think I agree with that because, and by the way, this discussion piece isn't like us saying they're going to miss. This is like, if they don't make the playoff, this is why, right?
If they don't make the championship, the playoff.
The playoff.
Yeah.
Mine was more about the playoff. I think championship, there's a lot of things that can go wrong for them not to make the playoff.
If they don't make
championship.
If they don't make the playoff, it's because Nick Skirton and the Texas A&M front seven just got after their butt all night.
Maybe. I'll say this also. You mentioned Georgia and Vanderbilt. I agree. I also would say Oklahoma for about a quarter, right? Maybe a quarter and a half. The Oklahoma offense obviously couldn't get going, and then you can't really hold that offense in check for 100% of the time. But I thought if Oklahoma had a manageable offense, I think that game's at least interesting going into halftime. Definitely, by the end of a little bit longer than what it was. But I thought that they came out decently against Texas. And on the offensive line, it's not that we're saying it's not good, right? You mentioned the top-level talent that they faced and struggled against, right? I think that outside of Kelvin Banks, who, again, we can throw out the Georgia game because Jalen Walker, you're going to get beat. Even if you're a franchise left tackle eventually, you're going to get beat by a franchise pass rusher potentially.
And one of those sacks wasn't his fault,
no, it wasn't. That's fine. Outside of him, he's been the one that I can say has been, I'd say 90, 95% pretty good the whole year, lived up to his hype. DJ Campbell struggled a bit this year, right? The interior offensive line in particular struggled a bit. The run game, I know it has to do with injuries a lot of the time too, because there's not the talent, the consistent depth there at running back to maybe shake off a couple of those bad blocks. You maybe make some room for yourselves. They're relying probably a lot more on those holes being created.
Real quick on that, this is why I've always said, as a guy who watched Texas and paid attention to them growing up, Bijan Robinson is the best running back I've ever seen, and I will be 80 years old telling you how Bijan Robinson was the best running back Texas ever had, because the amount of tackles he forced, missed in the backfield. He had to get 3 yards, he had to make 2 tackles miss in the backfield.
Sure, yeah.
And they don't have that guy this year.
So I'll say this. I think it's going to be, you mentioned A&M, of course, that game's building up to Nick Skirton and that whole thing. That's going to be an incredible game. Outside of that, though, I'm not totally sure that this offensive line gets pushed again until that game, right? And even
Arkansas isn't doing it. Maybe Landon Jackson, kind of.
Maybe Landon Jackson, but again, that's one player, right? As opposed to like a front seven. But A&M, I'll say, is the one team you have to worry for. And at that point, there's a reason why I think Texas has the inside track, because even if you lose the A&M game, right? Okay, you maybe don't make the SEC championship. We'll get to another team in a bit. ACC is probably just getting one. Big 12 is probably just getting one. They may get in anyway with 2 losses.
Yeah, that is very true.
So again, this is us finding reasons why, or reasons.
Nitpicking Texas is the segment title.
Yes, basically
nitpicking Texas and Texas A&M.
Yeah. So, but again, that is the weakness with this team so far. The consistent weakness, I would say, that you can look at and say, "Ooh, that thing." Like, I would love for them to have played Ole Miss this year.
That would have been a banger.
Front seven would have been
awesome.
incredible. right, versus this offensive line. I think Texas is a better team, but like Ole Miss specifically, their front seven would have been a great matchup for Texas. So
we should have named this segment actually
the nerdy
inserting
guy
yourself
putting
at
his
well,
glasses.
actually.
Yeah.
Actually, Texas is they're only rated a 70 on PFF.
Actually, if you look at the S&P Plus ratings and the Echo rate,
Listen, I like Bill Connolly, so I'm not going to slander him.
I got something coming up later on that.
Okay, Mallory. Actually, I was going to go to I was treating this like the spotlight segment. We'll just go on to the next team we're going to talk about. Texas A&M. Carter. Texas A&M will not make the college football playoff because
Lack of a downfield passing game. If they go with Marcel Reed the rest of the year.
Do you need to specify downfield passing game?
Any passing.
Any passing game, I was about to say.
And I guess that's not fair of me to say if they stick with Marcel Reed because it wasn't really happening with Connor Wegman either outside of the Missouri game. And Texas A&M's offensive, really the team formula is run the ball, stay ahead of the chains, shorten games, keep a lead. And now that Le'Veon Moss is injured for the year, they are running with Marcel Reed, quarterback run, Amari Daniels, who's very good, by the way. They're also already out Ruben Owens from the start of the year, and the primary backup now is E.J. Smith. So E.J. Smith, son of a legend, he's a grad transfer who has not really played much this year.
I'll say this. I think that when it comes to, we talk about the backfield as well, this wide receiver talent, I think, was severely under-addressed in the offseason.
Yes, they're not getting separation, and that's the issue now. If Le'Veon Moss is injured, fourth in the SEC in all-purpose yards, this really hurts their formula. And do they have a wide receiver to step up?
So here's why I think they're in a bigger conundrum, which is why I think they may be this is another position they may address in the offseason. I don't think Marcel Reed or Connor Wigman are the answer. I think this is what they have right now, right? If Mike Elko got a do-over, I think he would probably look in the spring for literally somebody. I'm not saying they're going to find, I'm not saying they're going to go get Will Howard from going to Ohio State, but I'm saying I think they maybe are a little bit more aggressive because there was a discussion heading into this South Carolina game saying, oh, you got to start Marcel Reed, right? If you look at the wins that he had as a starter, and again, QB wins, I know, but it's indicative of the offense and the weapons they had around him and what they kind of had to do. Bowling Green, Florida, Arkansas. By the way, all through Bowling Green and Arkansas were by less than a score, right? Less than a touchdown. Florida was by 13, and I don't think DJ Lagway started that game. No, it was Graham Mertz. So you look at the games that he started and won, right? I know LSU, he came in, but again, they didn't throw a pass. We had one deep shot. But because teams know, and then of course the South Carolina game, which they got blown out at, because teams know what he is as a passer, and he's not somebody, and neither is Connor Wigman, I want to specify, that's going to make up for those deficiencies on the outside, right? The one shot he had against LSU was a deep shot that he got, the wide receiver got past the secondary, and he hit him for over the top, and they ended up scoring. It wasn't him dissecting or Connor Wigman. Probably Connor Wigman against Missouri is probably the best game from any quarterback they've had this year. And I'm not saying that's a reason to start Connor Wigman, but I'm saying that that's looking more like a flash in the pan because they really didn't know who was going to play that game.
And Marcel Reed's best game of the year is when LSU didn't prepare for him.
Right.
Either.
Which
he
again,
came off the bench.
I think that's definitely on LSU because there was definitely film on Marcel Reed. So it wasn't like, oh, who's this guy?
Wait, what?
Yeah, the guy that started 3 games this year is pretty good. But I think that, yes, the downfield passing game is going to be a thing because now the running game is being impacted, which is why I think Marcel Reed may start the rest of the year because they need more running options, right? But this all goes back to, I don't think Connor Wigman was helped this year with losing Evan Stewart and a lot of their options not elevating their game. And it's not helped by Marcel Reed not having that upperclassman experience around him, and especially in the backfield with the injuries.
Good news is Jonte Cook changed his Twitter profile picture to Texas A&M.
Oh, did he? Oh, that's great. I love it.
Did he really?
He's changed it to, he was Oregon 2 days ago, right? And then it was A&M yesterday. It's probably going to be Ohio State or something.
I think OU was in there at one point too.
It's going to be great. He's playing slot machines with his career.
Do you think Michigan State will be in there?
No.
Okay.
Please, Mallory would kill to be Jonte Cook's profile picture for one day.
Please, just make it of Aiden Childs. Nick Marsh.
Texas A&M is 111th in the nation in passing offense. They've passed for fewer than 200 yards in 6 games. I just pulled up the stats here. Noah Thomas leads them with 3 receiving touchdowns. The next person is Theo Mellon Orstrom, who I believe is a tight end. Yeah, he's a tight end. Every other wide receiver has either 0 or 1 receiving touchdowns on this year.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll say this, to be a little bit more optimistic for A&M fans. Their losses right now are Notre Dame and South Carolina. Notre Dame's probably getting in. South Carolina is not a bad loss right now. They look actually pretty solid. I think Lenore Sellers got hurt in their last game, though. But they're actually looking pretty solid. They're 6-3 right now with games against Missouri, Wofford, and Clemson. They could finish 9-3. If they beat Texas, similarly to even if Texas loses to A&M, if A&M beats Texas, there's a scenario where they're on the outside, potentially, like maybe one of the first 2 out, right? 13th or something. But those 2 losses to Notre Dame and South Carolina are not bad enough. With wins over Missouri and LSU, which for some reason are still hanging around the rank. Like Missouri's has an outside shot at the playoffs still.
Oh,
Did you see what Eli?
yeah, no, I
you can't
know.
even get it out. It was so absurd what he said. You can't even finish your sentence.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're still in the hunt for the playoffs.
The depressing part is he's not wrong.
No.
He's
I
not
know
wrong.
that's not a
You
bad
look at the
point.
ranking, we can talk about the rankings in a bit, but he's not wrong, and because of that, A&M's resume looks better because they pummeled that team.
Right.
And so it's like they're still like A&M probably needs. I guess one more would probably do it, but if they can win out, which isn't unheard of, the schedule is not impossible for them to win out. There's a chance they're in, which is crazy.
And meanwhile, we're talking about SMU, and this just transitioned to this, and they're 8-1. We're like, it's looking tight. I don't know,
guys. Yeah, so let's transition to the last
frustrating.
team in the college football rankings. 13th, SMU. Carter, SMU will not make the playoff because
they're in the ACC.
Yeah,
That's a good enough answer for me.
that's basically it.
Okay, I don't
Unfortunately.
see a hole on this team. I tried to find one of why they couldn't make it based on the football field. And the only thing I can really think of is if the ACC gets one bid and looking ahead. Now, they still got a lot of work to do. They got to win out. But if they play Miami in the ACC championship and Cam Ward does Cam Ward things, are they on the outside looking in with a loss to BYU, who's undefeated in the Big 12, and Miami, who's the ACC champion?
Yeah, that's the issue, right? It's going to be ACC and if I'm being honest, the Big 12 right now too is looking like a one-bid league. You're looking at also the ACC. It's funny. The playoff is very hilarious to me because they use eye test when they want to. Yeah. And then when it's something that doesn't make sense, everybody's like, well, actually, if you look at the formula, they resort to some algorithm or saying, well, actually, the strength of schedule is like, okay, well, whatever.
It was like Florida State last year,
right?
They looked like they didn't. What I'm trying to say is they looked great, they had an undefeated record, right?
Yeah.
But do they pass the eyeball test? It's like, they kind of pick and choose when they want to,
Exactly. It was like, well, no, they lost their quarterback. We're not going to put them in,
Exactly.
Like
right.
They think we have squirrel memory.
Yes.
And it's like we can use one of 3 different reasons. We can use eye test, we can use record, we can use
all this
S&P Plus data.
Right.
And you won't remember, you can't contradict us because you won't remember the reasons we do for each team.
Correct.
Right. So the reason why I bring that up is I think what they're going to do with the ACC is heavily skew the eye test, because I did it with Duke, right, where I was like that's not a ranked team. You know, they were unbeaten or the one loss or whatever, and I was like, that's not a good team. And then of course the SMU ended up having 5 turnovers and still won the game. I think they're going to do that with a lot of the ACC. I think you look at Pitt, not sure if Pitt's that great. I think Louisville's a good team. I'll give Louisville. Clemson, they beat up on bad teams, and they got beat by a team, finally the first good team they played in a month. I fear that's what's happening with the ACC, is that they're going to look at that and say, how good are SMU and Miami really? Miami's been trying to lose a game for a month. They finally did, but they've been trying to lose a game to this conference and for about a month now. SMU's beating up on this conference, but how good is it? I'm thinking of their reasoning.
Shout out Haynes King, by the way.
Oh, definitely shout out Haynes
Georgia
King.
Tech is the National Cheez-It Team of the Week.
Hey, there we go.
By the way,
I love it.
So shout out Haynes King.
I believe that was his first game back in a couple weeks. Too.
It was.
Yeah, so that was really cool for them to beat Miami. But again, in a real in a just world, both Miami and SMU get in. I think those are whether or not you think they're top to bottom the best teams. I think resume wise, speaks for itself.
They want you to think that the SEC and the Big Ten already are the Texas Rangers and the ACC is the Frisco Rough Riders, and I just don't think that's the case right now. Maybe it will be in the future when we're actually in a Power 2 scenario, but right now it's not.
I would much rather see Miami and SMU in the playoffs than 4 Big Ten teams with Penn State squeaking in as like the last Big Ten team in.
Or Missouri.
Because they don't deserve to be in. Or Missouri.
Or Missouri, yeah. That's
Sorry,
it.
Tepper.
I was gonna say, like,
Yeah.
look, like the fact that we're like, okay, if these two teams play, first of all, these two teams have to make the championship game because, like, if one of them,
They got to win out, yeah.
they got to win out. Both teams have to win out to make the championship game, obviously to play each other, which is probably just a play-in game de facto. If
Yeah.
one of them loses, then you can guarantee that both teams aren't getting in.
Yeah.
Right. Like you can guarantee that there's no 2-bid league for the ACC.
Yeah, because how many does the Big 12 get? Do you
One.
think?
One. They're gonna get. They're
Definitely getting one. Because they're beating up on each other right now, really.
Here's the other problem. There's a nightmare scenario. I don't think the Big 12 gets one in.
No,
No, they've
they
got
have
it.
to get one in.
It's got to be the winner.
It's got to be the winner of the Big 12 gets in.
Yeah.
No way they do that.
Yeah.
In the first one, are you kidding me?
That's what I'm thinking.
That's why
because then everybody
That's the only reason why I think they get it in. Is because it's the first one. I think based
Okay.
off resume, I don't think the Big 12. I will openly say right now, I don't think the Big 12 is very good this season. That doesn't mean that I don't think they should get obviously their champion in. I think that is the only reason why we can guarantee the Big 12 getting one in. Because of the first one.
It'd be so funny if they didn't get in, though.
It'd
That'd be so
because
funny.
here's the thing. BYU is by far the best team right now in the Big 12. Probably not by far. Colorado's probably right there. Are those teams, if you're, again, I'm thinking as a playoff committee member, right? If you look at BYU and Colorado, and you look
eyeball
at
test right
A&M,
there. Yep.
LSU and Ole Miss, who are currently 14, 15, 16, are you like, well, you got to get BYU in? Or are you like, or are you more thinking like, oh, I guess we got to get BYU in because this is the first year we can't really sneak one of these 3 teams in that have like 2 or 3 losses.
Yeah, maybe it's the latter. I just think, they have to put the Big 12 champion in, or
I think
there will
have
be
to.
pitchfulks at
Yes.
the CFP playoff committee
1,000,
house, wherever they do,
1,000%.
whatever hotel, whatever Bellagio they do this in. There will be pitchforks outside of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they do it in Las Colinas, so I could be right.
They
down
do.
apart from
It's
my-
literally right down the road.
seriously?
Yeah.
The committee's right in Las Colinas and Irving. So I can just knock on their door and be like, hey, I might want to let BYU in.
Hey, are you not going to let the BYU in, the quarterback?
Shout out Retzlaff.
Shout out Jake Retzlaff.
But yeah, so we'll see. Obviously, the rankings come out tonight. We're recording on Tuesday. If you are listening to the podcast, so we'll see. But I had a chill go up my spine when I saw SMU at 13.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, they're going to stay at 13 until they win the championship, and then they're going to flip them in because they're keeping them just on the periphery right now.
They got to be in the 12-team ranking tonight, though. You think? Or is it still Miami going to be?
Miami's still got to
only
be in
4.
there.
Miami was 4 last time, so like what? They go to 8.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's weird. I had to, when the rankings, we'll move on to our spotlight games in a bit. I had 2 chills run up my spine when I saw SMU at 13, right outside, and when I saw Boise State at 12, right in. Like, I'm like, are we serious? Are we doing this right now? Are we just going to put like the 12 seed, they're treating them like Cincinnati, where it's like, oh yeah, they're the 12. They were right there with the number 1 team in the country, guys. They almost beat Oregon. But they're like, nope, they're just barely in because they're the best team in the G5. That's a top 10 team. I don't care what anybody
Yeah.
says. So
I agree.